Even though the launch of the Google Pixel Fold is still a few weeks away, we do have all of the specifications now, so I thought it would be fun to hone in on the camera, take a deep dive into those specs, and then compare those specifications with a couple of other important phones, namely the Google Pixel 7 Pro and the Galaxy Z Fold 4. Now, of course, the Fold 4 is rather important here because it's the only other foldable like this available in the United States, and the Z Fold 5 is not likely to shake up that camera setup a whole lot. So this camera comparison, in terms of these specifications, should be pertinent to the Fold 5 as well once that is fully unveiled a little bit later in July. Now, before we go any further, I do want to point out there's an important factor that I can't cover in this video really, and that is the software, the processing. As we have all seen in videos like Marques Brownlee's blind camera test, phones like the Pixel 6a with objectively inferior camera hardware still manage to come out on top because, again, processing is the most important factor. So when we're thinking about the Pixel Fold, we might have to keep that in mind a little bit. It will be very possible, if not likely, that the Pixel Fold will punch a little bit above its weight class when you're simply looking at those hardware specs. So what I've done here is I have condensed these specifications into this table. A lot of the stuff was pulled from gsmarena.com, although there were a few things that were missing that I had to kind of track down and find out myself. But this is how I've organized it, and we're going to kind of go through it as quickly as I can. There's a lot here, so we're going to go through this as quickly as I can and talk about what all this means. So let's start with the primary, the main sensor that we're going to be using most of the time. We're dealing with a 48 megapixel on the Pixel Fold and then two 50 megapixel sensors on the Pixel 7 Pro and the Z Fold 4. Maybe the simplest way to look at those numbers is that is the top resolution that these cameras are capable of shooting in, but they almost never do shoot in that full resolution. So we'll talk about that a little bit later. The next thing we have is the aperture, which is measured in this number here, F with a slash and then a number F stop or whatever it is you want to call it. People use different words for this. And they're all very, very similar, 1.7, 1.9, and 1.8. Now in this instance, the smaller the number, the larger the aperture. The larger the aperture, the more light is actually allowed to enter the camera's lens and hit the sensor. So again, they're all very, very similar, but the Pixel Fold does have slightly the largest aperture there. But again, these numbers are extremely similar, and you're not going to see a big difference on any of this so far. You can see your 25 millimeter, 25, and 23. What this basically means is that the Z Fold 4 and presumably Fold 5 will have the narrowest shot when you're taking a photo with that primary camera. But again, very, very small difference. The next number is interesting though. This is the actual size of the sensor. So the Pixel Fold is a 1/2 inch sensor. The Pixel 7 Pro is 1 over 1.31. The Fold 4 is 1 over 1.57. So the 7 Pro has the biggest sensor, the Fold 4 is next, and the Pixel Fold is the smallest sensor. So that is a big difference. The bigger the sensor, the more light that sensor can obviously collect. You tend to have quicker focus, better low light performance. It's just better to have a big sensor. So in this instance, again, 7 Pro, Fold 4, Pixel Fold. The next number here is a measurement of the size of each individual pixel on this sensor. So the Pixel Fold is 0.8 micrometers, 1.12 micrometers, and 1 micrometer for the Fold 4. Now this is important because, again, just like the sensor size, the bigger the actual pixel itself is, the more light it can catch, and that is just going to help. Again, same things with your focus speed, your low light performance, your detail. They're all aided by having larger pixels. Now, all of these modern cameras are doing something very, very similar called pixel binning. So I mentioned here already the resolution of these cameras, but I said that they never shoot at that full resolution. And the reason for that is because they bin. So the Pixel Fold is not going to shoot at 48 megapixels. It's going to probably shoot at 12 megapixels. So you're taking the 48 megapixel and you're binning it down to 12. So what does that do to your pixels? You're grouping them into groupings of 4. So 0.8 micrometer pixels grouped into 4s, hypothetically anyways, they've not specifically said this, but I think we can pretty safely assume this, that turns into 3.2 micrometer pixels. You do the same thing with the Pixel 7 Pro, which bends down to 12.5 megapixels. You get 4.6 micrometer bend pixels, and same thing over here, 3.8 micrometer bend pixels. So again here, the same pattern is emerging. The Pixel Fold's primary sensor seems to be the weakest of the three, not by a large margin, but it definitely is the weakest. It's the smallest. The pixels are the smallest. It does have the biggest aperture, but not by a whole lot. From there, the only real difference is that the Pixel Fold and the Pixel 7 Pro both have laser autofocus, where the Fold 4 does not. Everything else is pretty much exactly the same. You've got dual pixel autofocus, OIS, going to be very, very similar from there. Like I mentioned earlier, though, that Google image processing is extremely important. I actually want to give a shout out here to Ike's Tech Talk on Twitter, because I saw this conversation yesterday and it made me laugh. Basically what this is, I came across a Gcam port for the S23 Ultra. So you take a bit of that Google Pixel image processing and you put it onto another device, in this case the S23 Ultra. And if you look at these photos, maybe this is a bit subjective, but I feel like that the Gcam is doing a better job. This is the processing on the stock camera. It's a little bit overexposed, a little bit, too bright. On Gcam, it absolutely nails it. The contrast is better. The exposure is better. Same picture here, stock versus Gcam. That pixel processing is wildly important. So for me, when we're looking at this stuff, by the way, go find Ike's Tech Talk on YouTube. Great YouTube channel in their own right. When we're talking about this stuff, you can't just look at the specs and say, are they better than the Z Fold? They don't have to be better than the Z Fold. They just have to be relatively close, because that processing is going to do an obscene amount of heavy lifting to bridge whatever gap is there. And if you look at that primary sensor, to me, I do not see a large enough gap that processing is not going to be able to more than likely not only bridge it, but actually surpass what the Fold 4 is doing. I trust the Pixel's processing that much. With all that said, though, let's get back to the specs, because we still have more to cover. With the ultra-wide, they're really, really similar. The resolution is going to be very, very similar. The aperture is exactly the same. The big difference here, and the thing I kind of want to hone in on here, is how wide these cameras are or aren't. With the Pixel Fold, we're at 121 degrees versus 123 and then 126. It's just not going to be that wide. That's kind of a bummer to me. I miss the days of LG where they would strap an ultra-wide on their device, and when they would go ultra-wide, they would go almost fisheye. It would be so wide. So the Pixel Fold is a wide-angle lens, but it's not that wide, okay? It's going to be the least wide of any of these devices. If you look at your Z Fold 4, you're just going to get a touch more on screen in that shot than you will be with the Pixel Fold. As you can see here, pixel size is the same on both of the Pixels, and they're both bigger than the Fold 4. Now, I could not find the sensor size of the Fold 4, so I won't really spend too much time on that. Typically, these secondary and tertiary cameras aren't nearly as big in terms of their sensor size compared to the primary sensor, just because you're going to focus on that primary. So I think at the end of the day, the ultra-wide performance is probably going to be really similar across all three devices, with the biggest, most noticeable difference being the fact that the Pixel Fold will be a bit too narrow compared to the others. Looking at the telephoto, though, things get really interesting again. So the resolution is pretty spread out. So 10.8, 10, and then 48 for the Pixel 7 Pro. Typically with telephoto lenses, aperture gets quite a bit smaller, and you can see that there. I once again could not find the sensor size for the Fold 4, but I would assume, just like the other two, that sensor is getting smaller and smaller. Let's hone in on the pixel size, though, because we have 1.22 micrometer pixels on the Pixel Fold, which is not going to be binned at 10.8 megapixels. 1 micrometer pixels over here, so slight advantage to the Pixel Fold. And with the 7 Pro, it is a 0.7 micrometer pixel, but again, it's a 48 megapixel sensor, and it is going to be binned. So if you take 48 down to 12, you probably have 2.8 micrometer super pixels on the Pixel 7 Pro, but the biggest thing here is that we have 5x optical, 5x optical, and only 3x optical on the Z Fold 4. I believe that having the 5x optical on the Pixel Fold with the bigger pixels as well, it's going to be an absolute win on telephoto, on zoom for the Pixel Fold over the Z Fold 4. I don't think that's controversial at all. I don't think it's going to be as good as the Pixel 7 Pro's zoom, simply because it's such a better sensor overall. Those super pixels are so much larger, but I do think it's going to wind up being pretty reasonably close, and this is going to be one of the strongest aspects of the Pixel Fold. Now, when we talk about these selfie cameras, these are the cameras that are actually inside the tablet. I guess I should have moved this one down because this is the tablet selfie. This is the tablet selfie. These are the ones on the cover display. So this one really should have been down here. So the tablet selfie camera on the Pixel Fold, these specs are almost irrelevant because we're comparing it to the Z Fold 4, which is an under-display camera, and the quality is absolutely terrible. You're pointing the camera through the screen. The specs are far worse. The performance is far worse. The tablet selfie cameras, Pixel Fold is going to absolutely destroy the Z Fold 4. Pixel 7 Pro should have a better selfie camera, but there are another set of selfie cameras on the cover. And here things are much, much more similar. The resolution is almost identical. The aperture is almost identical. The focal length, how wide it is identical. The pixel sizes are identical. So that selfie camera on the cover display should be very, very similar. Again, the processing should be the only thing that differentiates them. Again, the Pixel 7 Pro selfie camera, in theory, should be pretty much right on par with these other two as well. Really, really similar specs. So where does that leave us overall with the Pixel Fold? In terms of the primary sensor, by a small margin, you could argue it might be the weakest sensor of this grouping. But again, pixel processing, I don't think it's going to matter a whole lot. I think it's more than good enough to produce photos that are going to compete with any foldable on the market. And if I'm putting money on it, which foldable is going to have the best camera, produce the best photos, I think the Pixel Fold is probably going to take that crown. When it comes to the ultra-wide, they're really similar across the board. So again, the processing is going to be the big takeaway with the telephoto lens. The Pixel Fold gets a clear win there. Tablet selfie is a clear win there. They put their camera in the bezel instead of underneath the screen. You may not like the way it looks, but the pictures, the photos, the videos are going to look miles better because of it. And the cover selfie should be, again, down to processing. And a lot of this, when I talk about the processing, is subjective. You may prefer Samsung's processing, the way that they punch up the colors to an unnatural level. You may like that. Sometimes I actually really do like that. But if you prefer the Pixel processing, it's going to be the way to go. Of course, once the Pixel Fold has been released, I will have it here in the house. I'm going to be doing lots of videos, literally comparing photos, side-by-side videos, side-by-side of devices like this. So you're going to want to be subscribed so that you don't miss out on content just like that, guys. I will see you on the next one. And until next time, stay nerdy, my friends.